And we have text message evidence that's submitted within our materials that shows that while the child's at father's home, she's having those mental breakdowns in communications with mom.
Mr. Anderson?
I still very much stand by Ms. Height's report. I understand the reunification counseling portion of however we're titling it, with reunifying with Isley. It's been so long, but I also feel as a dad and how I've been in Isley's presence her entire life that I can handle her in any aspect. And this whole court process has been so abrupt and I would feel unnecessary because I know in my home, in my care, or with Isley in my care and with my other two girls, there's never ever been a problem in my home. And even like I still talk to my other girls all the time, and I catch them up on all the proceedings and things that I'm going through right now. And even they still are just kind of like rolling their eyes, like, what the heck is going on? And I think that's one of the factors that's kind of at stake, is that there's so much verbiage being thrown around versus what's actually the fact. And when I talk to my other girls, they even tell me, like, Dad, we've never seen anything here, and Isley has been fine, or Isley has been this, or Isley has never acted like she's in fear. Or they speak for themselves, like, well, no, we don't feel that way, Dad. You haven't, like, we don't know what they're talking about with how I'll react. That's never been shown. Like, what does that actually even mean? And that was what I brought up in our first hearing to you, Judge, that like the whole coaching element, like it's all so abrupt and obscure, the whole thing. And I think that's the biggest issue for me right now, is where is this all coming from? Because my and Isley's relationship has been nothing but great, all up until the one day I get served a restraining order. And it's been a major loss, because all of a sudden it's just like she's dead. I had no communication with her. I had no warning signs that this was going to happen. And I've already had extreme loss in my life, and I base a lot of my parenting and the way I treat people based off of the loss, especially like what's in the paperwork, the suicide of my dad. That's been a huge part of how I basically live my life, how I parent, with not having my own dad around and having to endure the hardship that specifically suicide has brought on. And then all of a sudden, again, like, this is one more loss for me that just all of a sudden just happened. And it's hard to kind of navigate every day, because it doesn't make any sense to me based off of what I know and how Isley's been. And I kind of feel like there's a stalling element, because I know Isley's going to be stressed out, because I know in Isley's heart, she knows what the truth is, because I've never, ever inappropriately touched anybody. And so if there needs to be somebody in the presence of when I reunify with her, that's fine. I also know how to deal with my kids when they're stressed out. We had my niece got killed in a car crash one day, but she lived with my other girls, and I had to adapt to that one day with having my girls in trauma, and I handled it just fine. And I feel that I can handle a stressed out Isley as well. And if I need to do that with a counselor, that's fine. If I need to do that with Anne specifically, that's fine. I just don't want to push this out any longer, and however I can do that, I would really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Ms. Height, any comments?
Just a couple of quick things, Your Honor. Thank you. First of all, I'd like Your Honor to know that both of these parents have been cooperative, responsive, helpful in every way with me. I truly enjoyed visiting and meeting both of them. And as this was a very short turnaround, I look forward to having more contact as we continue into this process. It's very obvious that both parents care deeply for Isley. Melanie wrote and spoke to me both that she wants Isley to have contact with her dad, but obviously she wants that contact to be safe. He has just spoken, and he wants contact with her and feels that it is safe. I do stand by my report as far as what the older two girls and their mother said to me. I talked with each of them separately and independently, and there was definitely a thread through that was, I believe, uncoached, but very straightforward in what they were saying to me. I don't know what the underlying reasons are. I think everybody's concerned about that, but I do not believe that Isley is in danger from her father. And if she could have some kind of contact with him, I think that might help some of that anxiety to go down. I don't know what the next correct step forward is, but as I recommended, some amount of time in a fairly public space seems like it could be done in a way that would be less stressful for her than perhaps going for a weekend at his home. So I think we're all kind of at a loss to know why this is going on and what's the next best step. But I do stand by my report, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll give Ms. Gilmore just a few moments of reply.
And just briefly, I am somewhat concerned by the statement that we're generally blindsided by the fact that we're here. This child has been engaging in services for many years. We filed some of those records. There's indication that father was aware that this was happening. So, and we have text message evidence that's submitted within our materials that shows that while the child's at father's home, she's having those mental breakdowns in communications with mom. And my client is attempting to engage in those visitations and to do breathing exercises and things like that to facilitate it. But at this point, we were at a point of no return, as my client simply just couldn't get the child to go to visitation. And with the crux of this disclosure of inappropriate behavior, by father. So we are asking the court be cautious. We ask the court to start in a therapeutic environment or some sort of, not necessarily supervised environment, because I understand the safety concerns, but some sort of either with a provider or some sort at the visitation, even the peer counselor, to help facilitate that visitation.
All right, thank you. I appreciate everybody's input. Obviously, the humans are complex and we're difficult to understand. Motivations sometimes there's environmental factors, there's biological factors, there's other interpersonal factors, and they combine in strange and different ways. And so it's difficult at best to understand why we behave the way we do at times. What I do know and what I've heard from the parties is that both Ms. Anderson and Mr. Anderson are good parents and that are deeply concerned about their girl, and they're taking the best steps that they can and taking the steps they feel will be in the best interest of their child. So what I think is important to recognize here is that this first started out with some reports of inappropriate touching and physical abuse. There were unfounded findings by both CPS, Child Protective Services, and also the CJAC, Children Justice Something Center, which is a forensic interview group. They both made those unfounded findings. I think it's interesting to note, not throwing any shade towards Isley's way, but when she tells me that every visit for the past 5 years that she's been pushed, kicked, slammed, or slapped in the face is not credible. And when her stepsisters say that that's never happened, and I recognize that stepsisters and their mother, there may be some extra pressures involved. The children certainly don't want to disappoint. They don't want to spread dispersions over a parent. And yet at the same time, I think that their mother is a mandatory reporter, and that adds an extra pressure that might overcome some of those other concerns of fear of retaliation or what have you. And then also based on Ms. Height's comments, just the demeanor in which those comments were shared, it tells me that that's likely not the case, that those things happened. So I think also that the issues of anxiety that ties into my initial comments about the very complex nature of human beings. There's can be a lot of reasons why people suffer through anxiety, and they may manifest themselves through completely different reasons or avenues. So I think the Ms. Height's recommendations for a physical through a licensed professional, Dr. Smenk was mentioned as one. And that discussion is to also include anti-anxiety medications and other therapies and modalities that may assist Isley. That's the main concern, to help her to feel well. It sounds like the parties have agreed to engage Isley with Ms. Rosen and her associates, and also to have some form of Mr. Anderson being involved in that process also. I'm not exactly sure when that's going to happen. Sounds like the parties have agreed on that, and that if that hasn't happened already, I'm assuming that a date has been set for those therapies or counseling sessions. As far as visitation, a cautious approach has been really engaged in this ever since these issues arose. And so there's, I think, Ms. Height's recommendation of a cautious approach of 4 hours per week with an exchange at the Kelso McDonald's is fine. And that can start this weekend. And then the counseling will be supportive of that. It may not go terribly smooth the first couple of visits, or it may, I don't know. And yet at the same time, I'm reminded of children that suffer through a lot of issues. Their parents are deployed, they're gone for a long absence, and then they're reunited and they work through the issues. So that's the hope here, is that she can work through those issues and the family can continue to be supportive and loving towards her, that get her on a good foundation. So that's the court's order. So I'm basically adopting the recommendations of Ms. Height with the nuance that the parties have agreed to, that counseling through counseling associates. So any questions or clarifications, Ms. Gilmore?
I know we talked about it. Are we going forward with Ms. Rosen only for individual? Ms. Height, can you give some sort of input on that? Just so I have direction for my client.
I think that it probably would be in Isley's best interest to consolidate that. I don't know what her relationship is with Tess, if that would feel like a loss to her. I guess I don't want her to feel like she's under a microscope all the time and has all these things wrong with her and needs continuous counseling several times a week. So I feel like having Ms. Rosen on board would probably be the best starting place for her and give her maybe the most traction. I'm not opposed to her seeing Tess at all. But I guess I don't want her to feel like she has so much wrong with her that she's constantly in counseling. She's just a sweet, vulnerable girl.
I'll talk to Ms. Rosen and see what her recommendation is and maybe continue with core until we can get an appointment with Ms. Rosen. And then presentation.
Could I ask one more quick question?
Yeah.
Before we go there? Your Honor, in my recommendations, I asked for an itinerary so that if it's appropriate, I could stop in and visit with Isley and her dad a time or two. Is that part of your recommendation as well, or your order as well today?
Any concerns with that, Mr. Anderson?
No, not at all. I think
Yeah.
that actually.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah, so I'll adopt that also.
Thank you for that clarification, Your Honor. I appreciate it.
Do the parties feel that there needs to be some timeframes as far as the 4-hour visit? Does it, do I need to just set a baseline of noon to 4 unless the parties agree differently?
Yeah, I've been able to work with Mr. Anderson pretty well, so I don't have any concerns and I don't have my client's work schedule. Why don't we potentially discuss it this week and then set a presentation and then the court can decide if we can't? Okay.
Mr. Anderson, do you feel comfortable with that or no?
Yeah, that's fine. My schedule's pretty fluid.
Okay. All right. So today being the 7th, we could take a look at the, let's see, I need to double check my schedule. It's a little bit crazy in November.
I have quite a bit of hearings this week, but I probably could just get a pretty generic order out in short order. So I'd be happy to do the 14th. I'm also available the 21st.
Okay. If the parties feel comfortable with that, Ms. Gilmore could get that proposed order out to the parties, and you could all take a look at it, and I could take a look at it, and we could be here on the 14th of November to sign off on that. Does that work for everybody?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson, I'll try to get you that order no later than Thursday.
Thank you.
All right. So we will see everybody on November 14th at 9 a.m. for the presentation from today's hearing.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thanks all. I appreciate your help.